You're standing on the bank of a drainage canal, more than 100 miles from where a family's nightmare began. It is August 10th, 1981. Two fishermen came out here for nothing more than a quiet morning cast, the kind of trip men take to escape their own lives for a few hours. The water is murky, still, and unremarkable. The kind of canal you drive past 1,000 times on the way to somewhere else and never think twice about it. Then one of them sees something caught in the reeds near the bank. He doesn't understand it at first. The mind protects itself like that. It takes a moment too long to translate what the eyes are seeing into something the brain is willing to accept. He blinks. He looks again. And there is no mistaking it this time. Floating in that canal, more than 130 miles from a Florida shopping mall, is the severed head of a 6-year-old boy. That boy's name is Adam Walsh. 2 weeks earlier, he was laughing in a toy aisle, watching a group of older kids play video games, while his mother browsed a few feet away, looking for a lamp. 2 weeks later, this is all that has been found of him. His body, his arms, his legs, the rest of the small frame that once ran across a Florida backyard, will never be recovered. Not that week, not that year, not ever. And here is the detail that will follow you for the rest of this story. The man responsible for what happened to Adam Walsh will not spend a single day convicted of this crime. Not for 1 year, not for a decade. For 27 years, the truth about who did this will sit buried under lost evidence, false confessions, and one of the most infamous homicide investigations in American history. The way this case unravels will shock you. Before we get to who did this, you need to understand exactly who Adam Walsh was. Because this isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about how one afternoon, one department store, and one small act of ordinary parenting turned into a tragedy that rewired how an entire country protects its children. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you'll understand exactly why detectives, journalists, and true crime researchers still argue about this case more than 4 decades later. This is Cold Crime Chronicles, a channel devoted to cold cases. Spare a few seconds to tell us where you are watching from and at what time. Like and subscribe to the channel if you follow cold cases like this. Let's go back, not just 2 weeks before that canal, but further, to who this family was before their name became inseparable from tragedy. It is July 27th, 1981, in Hollywood, Florida, a quiet suburban city wedged between Miami and Fort Lauderdale on the state's southeastern coast. In 1981, Hollywood was the kind of place where families moved specifically because it felt safe. Palm-lined streets, a mall within driving distance, beaches nearby. The kind of manufactured American suburb that, on paper, checked every box for raising children without fear. Adam John Walsh was 6 years old. He had blonde hair and blue eyes, and by every account from people who knew him, he was a gentle, quiet child. The kind of kid who preferred to watch rather than lead, who didn't push his way into arguments, who did what he was told without complaint. Teachers and family friends would later describe him as timid, not shy in the sense of being withdrawn or sad, just naturally cautious, naturally deferential to adults and older kids around him. Hold on to that detail. It will matter enormously in the minutes ahead, because a child's temperament, the very same qualities that make a parent's life easier on an ordinary day, can become the reason a tragedy unfolds exactly the way it does. His parents, John and Reve Walsh, were a young couple in their early 30s, building a life that looked, from the outside, like the American dream in its most basic form. John worked in hotel development, spending his days negotiating deals and managing properties. Reve was a homemaker, the one who managed the household, the school pickups, the errands, the 1,000 small logistics of raising a young child in the early 1980s, an era before cell phones, before GPS trackers, before any of the digital safety nets that parents today take for granted. They were not famous, they were not wealthy, they were not, in any way that mattered before that day, remarkable. They were simply a family, the kind you could find on nearly any residential street in America, in nearly any decade. And that, more than anything else about this case, is what would make Adam Walsh's story so devastating to an entire generation of parents who heard it. If it could happen to this family, it could happen to any family. It could happen to yours. That afternoon, Reve needed to run what should have been the most forgettable errand imaginable, buying a lamp. Sears at the Hollywood Mall was having a sale, and rather than leave her 6-year-old home alone, which no reasonable parent in 1981 would have considered dangerous, she brought Adam along. Picture the scene as it likely unfolded. A department store on a weekday afternoon, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the low murmur of other shoppers moving between aisles. A store layout designed the way most Sears locations were at the time. Housewares and lighting on one side, toys and electronics not far away. It was the kind of store where a parent could reasonably glance across a few aisles and still see their child. Inside, Adam wandered toward the toy department, where a cluster of older boys had gathered around a video game display. In 1981, video games inside a department store were still a novelty. Flashing lights, electronic chimes, a small crowd of kids drawn to the display the way moths are drawn to a porch light. It was completely ordinary for a 6-year-old to want to stand nearby and watch older kids play. Reve could see the toy department from where she stood. She told Adam to stay right there. Then she walked a short distance away, just a few aisles over, to look at lamps. I want you to sit with how ordinary this decision was. This was not neglect. This was not carelessness. This was a mother making the exact same calculation that millions of parents make every single day. My child is nearby. I can see the general area, and I will only be gone a few minutes. Nothing about this moment, in the context of 1981, suggested even a hint of danger. But here is where the story turns. While Reve was several aisles away comparing lighting fixtures, a teenage security guard approached the group of boys gathered at the video game display. According to later investigation, the group had become rowdy, pushing, arguing over turns at the machines, drawing the kind of attention that store employees are trained to shut down quickly. The guard told the entire group to leave the store. Now think about what we already know about Adam. He was timid. He was the kind of child who deferred to adults without question, who wouldn't argue, wouldn't push back, and, this is the critical part, wouldn't think to explain to a stranger in a uniform that his mother was somewhere else in the building. He simply did what he was told, the way he always did. He followed the older boys out of the store. He never told anyone his mother was still inside. Somewhere in the parking lot, in the chaos of a group of kids being ushered out of a department store on a hot Florida afternoon, 6-year-old Adam Walsh was separated from the group and disappeared. When Reve finished looking at lamps and returned to the toy department just minutes later, her son was gone. At first, it wasn't panic. It was the low, familiar hum of mild concern that almost every parent has felt at some point. The moment you glance up and your child isn't exactly where you left him. Reve checked the surrounding aisles first. She checked nearby displays. She asked the toy department employees, the ones stocking shelves and running registers, if they had seen a small blonde boy nearby. Nothing. No one had noticed him leave. The concern sharpened into worry, and the worry sharpened, within minutes, into something closer to fear. Reve had store employees page Adam over the intercom system, a sound that, if you've ever heard your own child's name called out over a public loudspeaker followed by nothing but silence in response, you understand carries a very specific kind of dread. Adam Walsh, please come to customer service. No response. She called her husband. John rushed from wherever he was that afternoon to the mall, arriving to find his wife already searching frantically. Reve's mother arrived shortly after to help. 3 adults now combed the store, the surrounding shops, the parking lot, searching for one small boy who had vanished in what could not have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. Here is a detail that should genuinely disturb you. Nearly 2 full hours passed before local police were even contacted. 2 hours. In any missing child investigation, the earliest hours after a disappearance are widely understood, even by the standards of 1981, to be the most critical. It's the window in which a child is statistically most likely to still be nearby, still recoverable, still safe. By the time officers were finally notified and began their own search, that window had already narrowed considerably. When police did respond, the case immediately ran into a problem that had nothing to do with the competence of any individual officer. It ran into the fact that, in 1981, the infrastructure to handle a case like this simply did not exist yet. There was no nationwide database connecting local police departments to track missing children across state lines. There was no Amber Alert system to blast information to the public within minutes. There was no established protocol treating the disappearance of a 6-year-old with the kind of immediate, coordinated urgency we now consider the bare minimum standard. According to John Walsh himself, in interviews given years later, when he begged federal authorities to enter his son's information into the FBI's National Crime Database, the system used to track stolen vehicles, stolen boats, convicted felons, he was refused. There was, at the time, no file for missing children, no file for unidentified remains, nothing. A 6-year-old boy could vanish from a public shopping mall in broad daylight, and the machinery that should have existed to help find him simply wasn't there. Let that sink in for a moment. The very system meant to protect children, like Adam, treated his disappearance as something outside its scope. The Walsh family did the only thing left available to them. They searched relentlessly, alerted local media, and eventually posted a $100,000 reward for information leading to Adam's safe return, a substantial sum in 1981, equivalent to well over $250,000 today. The story rippled outward from local news into national coverage. Volunteers joined the search. Neighbors combed nearby canals, wooded lots, and vacant properties. Days passed, then a full week, then more than a week. On national television, John and Reve did something that no parent should ever have to do. They made a public plea, stating that they still believed, still hoped, their son might be found alive. Try to imagine the specific agony of standing in front of television cameras, forcing yourself to sound hopeful, while privately not knowing whether your child is being held somewhere, hurt somewhere, or already gone. 2 weeks after Adam disappeared from that toy aisle, that hope ended in the worst possible way, in a drainage canal more than 100 miles from home. We began this story at that canal, so let's return to it now with the full weight of what it actually meant for the people left behind. On August 10, 1981, the remains discovered by those two fishermen were formally identified. It was Adam. The medical examiner determined the cause of death was asphyxiation. Based on the condition of the remains, investigators concluded that Adam had likely died several days before he was found, which meant that for at least part of the 2 weeks his parents spent desperately searching, appearing on television, clinging to hope, their son was already gone. His body was never recovered, only his head. To this day, more than 4 decades later, the rest of Adam Walsh has never been found. His head was kept in the medical examiner's custody for over 27 years, until the case was finally closed in 2008. If you are a parent watching this, sit with that detail for a moment. Then understand that what came next somehow made an already unbearable tragedy even harder to comprehend. Because instead of a swift identification and prosecution of whoever did this, the investigation became, by the admission of the very department that ran it, a case study in nearly everything that can go wrong in a homicide investigation. Investigators, following what was at the time considered standard procedure, first looked closely at the people nearest to Adam. This included his own parents, John and Reve, who were asked to submit to polygraph examinations, and passed. It also included a family friend named Jim Campbell, a man who reportedly had an affair with Reve that had recently ended before Adam's disappearance. Investigators considered whether Campbell might have wanted to hurt the marriage or seek some form of revenge by targeting the child. Campbell declared his innocence, also passed a polygraph, and was ultimately determined to have been physically unable to make the trip to the location where Adam's remains were found. One by one, the people closest to this family were cleared. A criminal justice expert would later explain that this approach, focusing first on those closest to a victim, reflects completely standard investigative practice, then and now, because statistically, that is where the majority of violent crimes originate. It was not a failure of judgment to look at the Walshes and Campbell first. The real failure came next, because here is where the case truly went wrong. Not in who investigators suspected, but in what they physically lost. Evidence that could have definitively solved this case, including blood-stained carpet fiber and the vehicle it was found in, was reportedly misplaced or destroyed by the department handling the investigation. In an era before the DNA forensic science that we now consider standard in any homicide case, a single piece of physical evidence like this could be the difference between a conviction and decades of uncertainty. This piece was gone, and with it, likely the fastest and most direct path to identifying Adam's killer with certainty. For years, the trail went cold. Officially, unofficially, and in the private anguish of a grieving family, someone out there knew exactly what had happened to Adam Walsh, and that person was not behind bars for it. In October of 1983, more than 2 years after Adam's murder, a break appeared to come from an unlikely place, a prison cell in Rayford, Florida. A career criminal, already incarcerated on unrelated charges, told investigators that he was the one who had abducted and killed Adam Walsh. He implicated a second man, a fellow drifter with an extensive and violent criminal history, claiming the two of them had carried out the crime together. There was just one immediate problem with this story. Records showed the second man had an airtight alibi. He was locked in a Virginia jail at the exact time Adam disappeared from that Florida mall. He could not have been physically present and could not have been involved in any way. Confronted with this contradiction, the man in the Florida prison changed his account. He now claimed he had acted entirely alone. Investigators, cautiously hopeful, believed they might finally have their answer. But when they searched the specific location where the man claimed to have buried Adam's body, they found nothing. No remains, no physical evidence connecting him to the scene. Without a body, without forensic confirmation, prosecutors determined they simply did not have enough to file charges, no matter how detailed or seemingly accurate parts of his confession sounded. And then, only a few months later, the man recanted the confession entirely, claiming he had never been involved at all. This exact pattern, confess, recant, confess again, recant again, would come to define the next 2 decades of this case. The man was already known to law enforcement as a chronic, compulsive liar, someone who, along with his frequent criminal partner, would eventually claim responsibility for hundreds of murders across multiple states. Investigators later determined the two of them likely had nothing to do with the overwhelming majority of those confessions. Together, they earned a chilling and fitting nickname among law enforcement circles, the Confession Killers. So which of his confessions, if any of them, could actually be trusted? For years, nobody could say with any real confidence, and in that fog of uncertainty, an entire family remained trapped, unable to fully grieve, unable to move forward, forced to relive the worst moment of their lives every single time this man opened his mouth to a reporter, a cellmate, or an investigator hoping for one final truthful answer. He was not the only name that surfaced over the years either. Long after this initial confession and recantation, chilling new information would connect a completely different and far more infamous serial killer to the Hollywood, Florida area at the exact time of Adam's disappearance. A man whose later crimes would go on to horrify the entire country. Multiple witnesses would eventually claim to have seen him inside that very mall around the time Adam vanished. When detectives eventually traveled hundreds of miles to interview him directly, in a Wisconsin prison years later, he firmly denied any involvement in Adam's death. Investigators ultimately came to believe him, not out of leniency, but because his own confirmed victims fit an entirely different age range and profile than a 6-year-old child, and serial offenders of his particular type rarely, if ever, deviate that dramatically from their established pattern. The truth remained buried beneath false leads, recanted confessions, and a widening list of names that led nowhere. For years, it seemed entirely possible that this case might stay unsolved forever, that whoever took Adam from that toy aisle would simply never be definitively named. If you have watched up till this point, take a few seconds to drop a comment on this case. Consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. For nearly a decade, the case sat largely cold, revisited only in bursts by frustrated detectives, and by a father who had made a very public, very personal promise never to let his son become a forgotten statistic, buried in a filing cabinet. Then, in August of 1991, a full 10 years after Adam vanished, a witness came forward with a memory that had apparently haunted them for the better part of a decade. They told investigators that they had seen Adam get into a Cadillac on the day he disappeared, with a man matching the exact description of the original suspect from that 1983 prison confession. The same man who had confessed, recanted, and confessed again. Here is what made this particular witness credible in a way that none of the earlier leads had been. They described a very specific dent in the side panel of that Cadillac, a detail that had never been made public, never printed in any newspaper, never mentioned in any television broadcast about the case. There was no plausible way for this witness to have known about that dent unless they had genuinely seen the vehicle themselves, at some point close to the time of Adam's disappearance. For investigators who had spent a decade chasing false leads and false confessions, it was the first piece of truly independent, corroborating evidence connecting this specific man to Adam's abduction. It did not solve the case outright. It could not, on its own, secure a conviction, but it reignited an investigation that had gone stagnant, giving detectives a renewed and specific direction after years of dead ends. Over the following years, investigators painstakingly rebuilt the case file from the ground up. They cross-referenced old witness statements that had been filed away and forgotten. They re-examined what little physical evidence remained after the earlier losses. They carefully reconstructed this man's movements in the days surrounding July 27, 1981, piecing together a timeline from motel records, secondhand accounts, and scattered witness memories that had never been properly connected before. Multiple additional witnesses eventually came forward, confirming they had also seen this same man in the Hollywood, Florida area in the days leading directly up to Adam's disappearance. Piece by piece, across years rather than months, the picture sharpened into something investigators could finally stand behind with confidence. By 2008, 27 years after a mother lost sight of her son for less than 10 minutes inside a department store, Detectives with the Hollywood Police Department had completed an exhaustive, top-to-bottom review of the entire case file, incorporating every scrap of evidence, testimony, and investigative work gathered across nearly 3 decades. On December 16, 2008, they called a press conference that the Walsh family and much of the country had been waiting on for 27 years. The man they named, at long last, was Otis Toole. Toole was a career criminal and serial killer, a drifter with an extensive and deeply disturbing history of violence stretching back years before Adam's murder. By the time police finally named him conclusively, Toole had already been dead for over a decade, having died in prison in September of 1996 from cirrhosis of the liver, while serving a life sentence for an entirely unrelated murder. He was never formally charged in Adam Walsh's death. The evidence that might have secured a conviction had been lost by investigators years earlier. His confessions had shifted and contradicted themselves so many times that, for years, no prosecutor could confidently take the case before a jury. By the time detectives were finally confident enough in the totality of the evidence to close the file, the man responsible had already escaped any courtroom, any sentencing, any moment of forced accountability in Adam's name. Toole never stood trial for what he did to this 6-year-old boy. He never faced a jury, a formal sentence, or a single moment of public reckoning specifically tied to Adam's death. But police stated unequivocally that they had conclusively linked him to the killing through years of accumulated evidence, corroborated witness testimony, and an exhaustive investigative review, even without the DNA proof that had been irretrievably lost decades earlier due to the department's own early missteps. One additional, haunting detail came to light only after Toole's death. His niece later told John Walsh directly that her uncle had made a deathbed confession in prison, admitting, one final time, with absolutely nothing left to gain or lose by lying, that he had in fact killed Adam. Hollywood's police chief, addressing both the family and the watching public at that 2008 press conference, acknowledged something the Walshes had insisted upon for more than 2 decades, that the department itself had spent an inordinate amount of time and resources chasing other leads, other names, and other theories, instead of concentrating fully on the one man who had been, from very early on, the case's primary suspect. For John and Reve Walsh, the announcement did not bring their son back. It did not undo 27 years of unanswered questions, false hope, and repeated re-traumatization every time a new confession surfaced in the news. But it gave them something that had been denied to them for nearly 3 decades, a definitive end to not knowing. Grief either destroys a person, or it transforms them into something else entirely. For John Walsh, it became the fuel for a mission that would go on to protect hundreds of thousands of children he would personally never meet. In 1984, John and Reve founded what began as the Adam Walsh Child Resource Center, a small organization born directly out of their own experience, navigating a system that had failed them at nearly every turn. Over time, it grew into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, now one of the most influential and effective child safety organizations in the entire country. In the decades since its founding, it has assisted in the recovery of hundreds of thousands of missing children nationwide, children who, unlike Adam, came home. Their advocacy reached directly into the halls of Congress. In 1982, the Walshes helped push the Missing Children Act into law, forcing the FBI to finally add missing children's records to its National Crime Information Center database, the exact system that had refused to include Adam's information just 1 year earlier, when it mattered most. In 1988, John Walsh became the host of America's Most Wanted, a television program that turned ordinary viewers into an extended network of eyes for law enforcement, using public tips generated by the broadcast to help track down fugitives across the country. Over the course of its long run, the show was credited with assisting in the capture of hundreds of criminals, people who, without that public spotlight, might still be walking free, exactly the way Adam's killer once did for 27 years. And on July 27, 2006, exactly 25 years to the day after Adam disappeared from that Sears toy department, President George W. Bush signed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act into federal law. The legislation expanded the National Sex Offender Registry, significantly strengthened federal penalties for crimes committed against children, and created new tools specifically designed to help law enforcement combat the sexual exploitation of children. A decade later, further legislation extended and reinforced those same protections, ensuring the funding and framework would continue well beyond the initial law's passage. Every fingerprinting booth at a school safety fair, every missing child photo circulated instantly online instead of printed weeks later on a milk carton, Every improved protocol, dictating how quickly police must respond when a child goes missing. Trace nearly all of it back far enough, and you consistently arrive at the same origin point. A 6-year-old boy who followed the wrong group of older kids out of a department store on an ordinary July afternoon, simply because he was too timid to speak up and say his mother was still inside. Adam Walsh never got the chance to grow up. He never got to see the world he ultimately helped reshape. But somewhere out there, in the decades since 1981, a child who might once have vanished without a trace was instead found safely, located faster, tracked more effectively, protected more completely, because of the systems his own parents fought relentlessly to build in his name. That is not justice. Justice, in any conventional legal sense, was denied to this family for 27 years, and even once Adam's killer was finally named, it came without a trial, without a formal conviction, and without the courtroom accountability any grieving parent deserves. But it is a legacy, and in a story defined so completely by loss, it may be the only thing anyone involved could ultimately salvage from it. If this story affected you the way it affected me researching it, stay with us. In the comments section, tell us what part of the story got to you, because next, we're opening the file on another case that changed the way America protects its children. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.